Welcome, everybody, to our energetic self-mastery class, Etheric Abuse and Mind Control. I am very excited about this subject, and as you know, this is a topic that is extremely timely in these uncertain times that we are in. People are looking for all kinds of solutions in all kinds of places, mostly outside of themselves, which means that we are currently seeing an extreme increase in, say, cult-like groups, cult-like behavior, mind control, brainwashing, and also etheric abuse in and around our environments, in companies, in families, in politics and education, and especially in spirituality. So as I was putting together the material for the self-mastery class last week, I realized quickly that these three parts that we normally investigate here in this systematic development of self-healing strategies, namely analyzing what the problem is, how it can play out on the physical, emotional, mental, social, spiritual, and energetic, etheric level of us humans, then the energetic alignment that allows us to shift our energy around it. So the first part is more of a secular and educational part. The second part is more of an shifting our inner attitude and our energies around the subject so that we can tune into the deeper understanding of it. And then thirdly, to develop self-healing strategies and roadmaps for ourselves, for our friends, for our clients, whomever it concerns. The energetic self-mastery classes are mostly designed for people who work with other people or self-healers. So big welcome to you to this class, which will have to be two classes, okay? Because I realized that either of these, any of these three parts is really a full class. And this is why I decided that we will focus around the problem today. We will not go into solution finding yet. We will focus on analyzing and educating ourselves on the problem with mind control and etheric abuse. We will, as always, use discussion and sharing as a part of this learning. And we want to, in our minds, first sort the complexity of this problem. Many of the self-mastery classes that I've held in the past serve as a preparation for this self-mastery class, simply because when it comes to mind control, brainwashing, and etheric abuse, all different layers, all different energetic states that we as humans can find ourselves in, psychologically, emotionally, and physically, play into this. But the most important part that we're going to be addressing here, and in this way you can look at it as an advanced class following the previous class, delusion, is about our perception, our error perception, and perhaps, as we will find out, the mechanics of self-deceit, how we deceive ourselves. So perception and deception. It's a very, very complex subject that has led to a whole body of writings and research and controversy, because in this day and age, we are literally at the precipice of defining this for the first time, the ethics and the values of that, and how we as humans can effectively inoculate ourselves from mind control. So we're going to investigate what mind control is, what brainwashing is, and the techniques that are being used, what etheric abuse is, then what is actually influenced. So we go a little deeper here with mind control. What makes us susceptible? what is the damage, or what can the damage be? Then we're going to briefly look into the pathologies of mind control and how to protect ourselves and fight back, and ultimately the self-healing strategies. But and the energetic alignment aspect to this, which you have to understand, is basically etheric protection. Okay, because even when we talk about mind control, when we talk about brainwashing, we are still talking about our energy, our psychology, often also our body and our emotion being controlled from the outside. And this is really what we're looking at here. We're looking at external control on any of these levels. So let's then briefly discuss the differentiation between these different forms of externalized control. So external control is something from the outside controlling me. Externalized control is allowing something from the outside to control me. And I want to create a little bit of structure here. Maybe investigate with you mind control techniques and brainwashing, cult and cult-like behaviors, and then we're going to move into the discussion about etheric abuse. Mind control and brainwashing, as well as cult-like behaviors and phenomenons, are currently being investigated on a large scale, which means we have a little bit of material. I have a little bit of material that I can present to you here, not with citation, but with examples. Etheric abuse is still a keyword that if you Google it, you won't even find anything. Probably the only writings about etheric abuse is what I have been writing over the last 10 years. Because it's not actually acknowledged as a condition nowadays. Now, amongst this audience here, so if you were listening to this recording, if you are here right now, then etheric abuse is most likely not something unknown to you. And here's where I would like to bring you guys in. What is your experience with mind control or brainwashing, cult techniques, and etheric abuse? Does anybody want to share?
Hi, Jona.
Hi there.
The first thing I want to say is that just listening to you talking about this, I am having a very physical nervous system response.
Okay.
I can feel all my alarm bells going off. I have this energy sensation. I can't really explain it, but it's everywhere. So I'm just kind of going with that. It's very interesting to me that I'm
Do you have
having
an inkling? Do you have an inkling why this rings physical bells in you? Okay.
Because this is very hardwired into me, into my nervous system protective stuff that goes off. I've experienced this before, and now I can see some of the main things as far as brainwashing and etheric abuse. They're very simple, and you wouldn't even know them, but just it's almost like this beginning of ingrained idea that you are alone and that nobody would ever understand or believe what you would have to say, and there's something very wrong with you, and it makes you feel simultaneously alone, but almost to the point where then you start to attack your own self for your own doubts, right? So it's like you've been attacked for who you are for so long that then you attack yourself for who you are, and then it becomes all of what you are.
And with the consequence then that you lose the sense of what you are.
Right. And I think this is what my nervous system is screaming about here, this memory of loss of self and loss of connection. And just hearing you talk about it I'm literally sitting here perfectly fine. There's nobody around me. And all of my physical self and my energetic self is, there's no words to describe this feeling, really.
There's a reaction.
Yes.
There's a reaction, and there's something inside of you. I mean, we haven't even started yet.
I know, right? That's why I wanted to say this right away, because I know we haven't started yet, but
And this is wonderful
yes.
because it shows you something. But Amanda, I'm going to ask next why we would even educate, why we even want to educate ourselves about this. So, so let me ask you again, do you have an inkling of, you said you were exposed to it.
Mm-hmm.
What, in your life, in your personal experience, in your life, where you've come across any, either or all of them, different versions of externalized or external control.
In relationships, okay.
Relationships?
This is the biggest one for me, that I can think of right now. Not so much, I guess, in relationships, in also in religious organization, and even in family.
Yes. And that is quite shocking, actually, if you think about it.
It is.
For a second. Because when we first think of mind control and those sort of fancy words, we kind of think like, oh yeah, that's something that happens to others. I'm too smart for this. This doesn't happen to me. Okay, this isn't part of my life. I might know people, I might have clients who have this problem, but I don't. Okay, there is another place where this very frequently in our daily life occurs, and that's in companies.
Mm-hmm.
People can find very similar techniques in companies, and there is a new phenomenon that wasn't even there just 10 years ago. That's in social media.
That was going to be my next thing,
Yeah.
in the social media exposure.
Mm-hmm. And you've used the word exposure here, and I want to just put a little pin it on it, okay? And then I'm going to come back to this later. But why would we even want to educate ourselves? Why would we feel the need to protect ourselves from mind control or external control? Who of you would like to share? I mean, Amanda, you've just shared that you would like to learn more about it, and you would like to protect yourself more from it because you've already experienced it and some of the destructiveness of it. Okay, there can be other reasons. We can be family member of someone. Does anyone here in this audience know someone in family or social circle who has been part of a cult? We go through the definition here of cult, or who has experienced sort of severe breakdown, maybe as part of being in any kind of mind control, brainwashing situation. So this can be a motivation because it's not always just us. The reason why we're interested in this is because we want to know how we can be controlled. Why is this? Because we're afraid of it. The fear number one, besides public speaking, is to be controlled from the outside. And yet, the reality is that the majority of us, in fact, are controlled from the outside without even noticing it. And you mentioned it, Amanda. There is a deceptive quality to this, especially when it comes to families, for instance, or relationships, because there's a part in us, especially if we have these values and these good intentions, okay, wanting to trust in others, wanting to unconditionally trust in others. And there's a problem there. If this unconditional trust in others gets misused, then we experience something, well, it feels, I mean, there's sometimes a shame aspect to this, but it feels almost annihilating for us. It has an effect on our own identity. I really liked how you said this just right now, Amanda. It leads to a loss of self, a loss of connection, a loss of knowing who I am. Okay, and that's ultimately the core fear that we all have. The core fear is that we don't know who we are, that we don't know where we belong, and that we do not feel connected to anything. And that's why a big part of the self-help, self-healing, self-improvement business, which is a huge business in these days, is all around regaining control or protecting ourselves from being controlled by the outside. What most people don't see is that the very thing that puts them or makes them susceptible to mind control is the very thing that they're energizing the heaviest. And this is the second pin that I want to put into a keyword here. The first one was exposure. The second one is self-deception. Okay, so let's summarize this real quick because we had a few late comers here. The subject of mind control, brainwashing, etheric abuse, cult or cult-like techniques needs to be differentiated first. We need to find out what it actually is, what the background is, what all these have in common, and why we want to learn to protect ourselves from it, and what it actually is that makes us susceptible to them. So what we found out right now is that we can have three main reasons. One is, of course, preventing ourselves from being controlled by the outside, because it can have a detrimental effect on our self-identity. The other one is perhaps being affected by some kind of, being part of say, a family or a friend or a loved one being mind controlled, can have detrimental impact on this relationship, on the family. External control is like a virus. It's like an infection. It can literally destroy families. It can literally destroy nations. It can destroy companies. It can destroy people. All right. And the third reason, and we haven't even talked about this yet, is perhaps preventing that we ourselves become somebody who does mind control on others. Who of you has ever had this thought? As part of your integrity, as part of your own values, that perhaps you're the one who's manipulating or deceiving or controlling somebody else.
Hi.
Hi, Annette.
I'm just thinking about my work situation when we are gossiping.
Yes.
Well, I did it sometimes myself. And is it externalized control, mind control? isn't it?
Well, it is a form of manipulation.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a very complex situation because you have a group. So, you know, it could be any group. Okay, it could be a group of friends, could be a group at work, could be a group in a church, could be a group within a family, right? You have the peer pressure, you have the others, you have some kind of group identity. You have a group identity that, you know, determines certain values, certain beliefs, certain, you know, how things are done, certain mindsets. There's a certain mindset around this. Okay, and that mindset dictates what's good or bad, right or wrong. And gossiping, which is, you know, bad mouthing, gossiping, talking behind somebody else's back, does something. It uses the mind, the group identity, the mindset of the group identity as means, as a tool, as a power tool against one person.
Yeah.
Or group, you know, can be another group. It's not always that personal, but it really is basically a form of negative energy that you're sending into somebody's direction. And it always it comes, you know, when it comes from a group of people, and when it comes from a group, a peer, a sort of common mindset, okay, it's always more powerful. So as humans, with you know, how we are designed, how our nervous system is designed, we are not free of that. So we have a certain pack mentality. Subconsciously, we know that you know, if my opinion and your opinion, if they both are the same, then it's a stronger opinion. And someone who's only one, right? So if there's two or more that agree on one particular subject or viewpoint or belief or mindset, then ours is stronger than yours. And so in that way, we are all unconsciously using mind control techniques or manipulation techniques by finding a group of people who are agreeing with us, or trying to convince a group of people to agree with our view, with our belief, with our ideology, if you will. I'm trying to formulate this as neutral as possible. All right. To use this as a power over somebody else. And you hear this in everyday conversations a lot. When someone is using this as a tool, conversations will sound something like, we've decided that this or this is not good, you know, or that it's bad, or what you did isn't good. So we use the power of the group identity. And in that way, yes, it is a form of manipulation. I wouldn't necessarily call this mind control, simply because the alliances in such environments, you know, in amongst friends or colleagues, can change, right? Tomorrow it can be you that they're doing this with. Okay, so it's not like there's one person singled out and they are getting hammered by the entire group, like you would find this in cults. So in cult or cult-like organizations, as well as families or groups, you will find that there is this systematic and strategic manipulation.
I see.
And since we're talking about peer pressure and pack behavior, something that is a big part of our human nature, there is one aspect here that Amanda mentioned, subjectively out of our own experience, but that's also something that we can use to measure the degree of this manipulation. And that is when we are being singled out. So this fear of losing connection, of losing belonging, is a very important part of this. Okay, it's very, very important because it's such a core fear in all of us and plays into our inner child attachment, if you will, our separation anxiety, that nobody is free of it. There's not a single human in this world, with the exception of psychopaths and sociopaths, where there's a mental illness. So there's a different brain structure, there's a different brain chemistry, okay, abnormal, okay. But besides that, there's not a single human that is free of this core fear. So we got to remember that. This is also the reason why this subject is so complex, because we are talking about a multitude of very intrinsic mechanics inside of ourselves that are being affected when we are being mind controlled or manipulated or even brainwashed. So you can see there's different degrees of this. Thank you for asking this, Annette. Any other questions in regards to whether certain things that you yourself perhaps have come across or caught yourself and or observed in others might be qualifying for mind control or brainwashing? I did not include emotional manipulation because it's such a common phenomenon amongst humans. I mean, if you so will, emotional manipulation is what drives a lot of our relationships. So when we go into that area, then we were opening up another 10-hour workshop. Okay. How to identify emotional manipulation. And I would like to reference the workshop that we've done on emotional processing that can help you to sort this a little bit, where emotional manipulation comes from and what in us makes us susceptible to emotional manipulation. But because it is such a common human trait, okay, we cannot include this here in this discussion. But mind control and brainwashing, cult behaviors, and etheric abuse go beyond just a normal, everyday kind of manipulation, power and control techniques. The part here about social media and media altogether, which is the latest phenomenon here in the last 10 years, is now a problem with a magnitude that we cannot even oversee yet. We have new mental illnesses, social anxiety. It used to be just sort of a small section in the DSM, acute anxiety disorder, is now, multiple chapters in regards to whether this is caused by actual interaction or online interaction or the different kinds of exposure. So we have to be very aware that this is something that will be even more of a public discussion here in the future than it is already. Some of the most recent, very, very controversial and highly interesting cases here to date in 2020 is the case of the Nexium self-help organization whose leader got arrested 2 years ago and is actually being sentenced next week. And there's a lot of media coverage about this right now. There's several movies, documentaries. There's a documentary on HBO. There's a documentary on Stars. And this is something that I would recommend anyone who would like to really educate him or herself how this new form of manipulation with the use of social media, with the use of phones, with the use of traditional and modern mind control, brainwashing, code manipulation techniques, and etheric abuse all together created an organization, a criminal organization that is now being prosecuted for anything from the usual things such as tax evasion and financial gain, sex trafficking, violating immigration laws. It's a whole list of indictments here that are being handled in court right now, all under the pretense of self-help, spiritual seeking, and self-improvement. And since you guys here are here because you are seeking this too, I realize that this is a wonderful opportunity for us to really dive a little deeper into this and how to differentiate all these things and where we can find them in our lives so that you can inoculate yourself, protect yourself from it, as well as others, loved ones, family members, or clients. But the biggest problem with it is the discernment, is the ability to even identify it. And what's so mind-boggling about this is that when we really investigate this, we'll find out where in our daily lives we are already being mind-controlled, brainwashed, where we are experiencing very similar code-like manipulation and perhaps even etheric abuse. So this is here in social media, relationships, religious organizations, families, or companies, probably the most common ones. So let's look into this. What is mind control? So I've worked with definitions on the internet that I could find so that we can systematically investigate and discuss this. So I want to ask you to discuss this and where you see these things. This is very important here to not just have this secular and sort of scholarly attitude to it, but to really compare this with our daily life and to look into like, wait a minute, you know, according to this definition, I'm also seeing this happening here, 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 and here. What is mind control? Mind control is defined by subverting by the means of psychological tactics an individual's control of his or her mind, thinking, behavior, emotions, or decisions. Okay, so this is obvious. Okay, so when we talk about control, when we talk about, you know, ourselves, what we want to be in control of, then we can see that, you know, the things that can be manipulated in us is the way we think, is the way we behave, the habits that we have, the way we make decisions, the emotions, and a lot of times also the physical sensations that we have. This is very important, okay, because like Amanda demonstrated to us, someone who has been a victim of mind control, of brainwashing, abuse, and we'll come to a very specific kind of this, why there's so many people who actually have already abused this, have a physical reaction to this. That's because this spread that I mentioned earlier of mind control techniques is so deceptive and so persuasive, okay, that we are basically confronted with the fallibility of our own psychology, of our own design. And ultimately, anyone who knows how the human nature is structured, who knows the human psyche, who knows these inner workings of emotions, of the brain chemistry, the neuroscience, the cognitive structure, emotional processing, decision making, and communication, can use this knowledge against us. So this is really deep, guys. It brings up an ethical question, and I would love to discuss this with you here real quick. Sounds like a diversion, but it is an important discussion. Energy work, the ability to read other people's energies. In some cases, some of us, the ability to read other people's minds. To see beyond the shroud of false self-perception in a person, beyond their words and their behaviors. Do you think that this is a knowledge or a technology that can be used for mind control? What's your opinion on this? It's an ethical discussion. It's not about right or wrong. What's your view on this?
Well, I feel like I guess that comes down to integrity, because you've taught us before that the empath and the narcissist they're both energetically sensitive, right? They both have these abilities, and then one has empathy and then the other doesn't, which makes it more enticing to use these things for control and manipulation rather than integriously for.
So what I hear you say is that empathy can be something that protects you from the misuse of that.
Yes.
On one hand, okay, it protects you from becoming the abuser, perhaps, but does it actually protect you from being abused, from becoming a victim? No, it actually
No.
can be something that makes you susceptible, right? In this
Yes.
case, with the narcissist, because your humanity, right, which is sort of symbolized through empathy, if your humanity is for whatever reasons, for psychological reasons or mental illness reasons, isn't functioning like it is functioning for other people, okay, then this doesn't apply to you. You don't suffer from what you call this integrity, but what on a normal human level would be called conscience, right? Conscience. There's a part in us, yeah, that operates with values such as guilt, okay, healthy guilt, okay, that informs us when we are doing something wrong, when we are hurting somebody else. Okay, so empathy in and of itself is a human trait, okay, Guilt is a healthy emotion. But then there are, of course, extreme forms of that. So the empath, I've mentioned this before, can be seen. Being an empath is someone who has difficulties with discerning their own emotions, their own sensations, and their own thoughts from that of others. So there can be an over or an extreme identification with the emotions of another person, which can make us extremely susceptible to feeling guilty all the time. Okay. And, sort of insecurities about boundaries as a result of this. So, in other words, what I hear you say is that yes, this knowledge, this ability to feel other people's feelings, perhaps even to, read their mind or to read their overall energy, can be misused if there's something not in place. And that is a certain level of empathy, a certain level of alignment of a person, yeah, a virtue, if you will, that requires the person to operate based on not wanting to harm somebody else. But what about all these different versions of mind control and power in our world? I mean, there's so many examples in history, guys, where, say it's expressed in phrases such as, sacrificing a few for the greater good of all. Justifications for, manipulating or controlling people for the greater good of things. Ultimately, our legal system as well, can be questioned from an ethical point of view. Okay, so, and it constantly is. That's why we have this blown up legal system in our countries. Okay, because it's never really clear, well, who actually is being harmed, who is the one that causes the harm, and, what is the damage? Yeah, this is the biggest issue for the legal system. So when we look at, the question whether or not energetic sensitivity, the ability to feel other people's emotions, to tune into their energies, whether this is a technology in quotation marks, obviously it's a human technology that should be regulated because it could be misused, or whether this is something that if everybody can do this, could lead to a major shift in evolution in our societies. Because if everybody can do this, all right, technically we all can, but say if everybody was trained in energy reading, provided that we are all capable of it, which from a scientific point of view needs to still be proven. What this mean? If everybody could read energies, if everybody knew their own energies, knew their own state, knew their own susceptibilities, their own shadow parts, their own attachments, would this mind control between humans even be possible? What do you think?
Well, no, because we'd all be operating within truth.
Exactly. So it is a potential tool to protect ourselves from mind control. And I would bet that many of you are listening to this or came here or came to learn about energies for these two reasons. Either trying to protect yourself or perhaps even, if you're honest with yourself, to gain an advantage over others. Who of you started out in energy work wanting to gain more control, just in general, perhaps also over other people? If I'm absolutely 100% honest with myself, I'm raising my hand. Because any kind of advantage would help me to better survive, to better succeed, to, well, also, of course, be free and independent and all these things. This is what I told myself. I told myself this is all about me being free. But at the same time, I also saw the advantage over others. If I look at my own journey, I started out as a scientist. I wanted to know how things work. Basically realized that science in this current paradigm isn't enough to really investigate this. I realized that it is in the human perception and that I need to investigate the human perception to fully understand how things work. And then I got more and more from the physical over the emotional, the mental, the spiritual into the energetic, realizing that, wow, if you know all these things, you truly are free. Yes. So for me, it was the journey of self-discovery and self-mastery that made me interested. But if I'm 100% honest, it was also about succeeding by having an advantage over others. And how did I reconcile that? And those of you who have done energy healer training with me know this. It's the painstaking part of energy healer training, namely the ethics and the responsibilities of this. This can only be reconciled if we have very clear values and if we know what our alignment is. If we know why we're doing this. And so what I have ultimately started based on curiosity, based on seeking knowledge, trying to gain more, turned into the journey of self-healing, and then ultimately into the journey of helping others to self-heal and heal. So I want you to understand, and this is why this is such an important discussion here, that when we investigate the mechanics of mind control, brainwashing, and etheric abuse, that you will, within yourself, run into resistances because you use techniques in your everyday life to gain control over others in one or the other way. Emotional manipulation is probably the most common one. And it is so normal to us that we don't even think there's anything wrong with it. We think it's quote unquote normal. But that doesn't mean that it's okay. But when it comes to the more fancier techniques that allow for these psychological or even energetic tactics of control of a person, we have to be very thoughtful and mindful and discerning to not develop rigid mindsets here. So what's brainwashing? Brainwashing, also known as mind control, menticide. That's a cool word. I'd never heard this before. Coercive persuasion, thought control, thought reform, and re-education is the concept that the human mind can be altered or controlled by certain psychological techniques. Brainwashing is said to reduce its subject's ability to think critically and independently allow to allow the introduction of new unwanted thoughts and ideas into the mind, as well as to change their attitudes, values, and beliefs. Now, this is interesting. What are we doing as coaches, as therapists, as counselors? Isn't that what we're doing? How does this fit together? Guys, your thoughts. Isn't this what we're doing? Helping a person, a human mind, to alter or change existing behaviors, existing mindsets, existing habits by using psychological techniques for the sake of healing or reform or re-education. We can also use the word recontextualization or reframing. I use them a lot.
Well, is it that these people ask for this? They will say, this is the problem, this is the belief, this is, so I'm asking for a way to help recontextualize this or work through this attitude or belief, rather than it being imposed upon them.
Yes, and this is really the main differentiation here. Okay, so all this mind control and brainwashing happens without the person being aware of it. In a coaching, counseling, psychological evaluation, psychiatry, well, not psychiatry, but psychoanalysis or therapeutic situation, it doesn't happen without the person's knowledge. But as the very process of helping the person entails the bypassing of those rigid beliefs, values, mindsets, because they are the subject of the problem. They are what, inhibits or blocks or, makes the person sick. So the main difference between brainwashing and mind control to therapy, energy coaching, life coaching, counseling, and psychoanalysis is that there is an insight here in the person, that there's something inside of themselves, typically their own mind, the deception of their own mind, that does not allow them to change their own views and their own perception. So in a way, and this is a very important thing to clarify before we go a little bit deeper into the techniques that can be used, all right, this is something that we need to be aware of. And in our daily life, we see, well, maybe not in your daily life, but in my daily life, I see this a lot, that there is, even though we differentiate it in this way, a massive amount of abuse in therapy, counseling, coaching, life coaching, and especially a spiritual / new age kind of assistance, okay, like readings, channelings, and so forth. Who of you has ever been in contact with or experienced in this spiritual realm some kind of abuse or manipulation? Yeah, I mean, I see this in my practice, of course, every day, because this is really where people then end up. Okay, I want to give you a few examples. One client came to me and said, I went to an energy reader and she told me that I'm going to lose my job and that I'm going to get divorced within the next 12 years. 12 months. And I couldn't get this out of my mind. It completely destroyed my life. Can you think of similar things? Why did it destroy this person's life? Annette, if you were
Yeah,
saying something, oh, there you are. Okay, I couldn't hear you
yeah,
before.
yeah. I was thinking about it's not my sister, but a really good friend I have. She had been to a energy reader who told her that she would be serious sick 3 years later, and she was so afraid and with so much fear. And it, yeah. Um,
And it probably made her sick, right? I mean,
yeah,
not
yeah,
knowing that
probably
is very sad.
not not serious, but it was crazy.
Hmm.
So much fear she had because of that.
There's a sort, yes, it's crazy making. It can be crazy making because we can't unknow this. All right. So
Yeah.
if we externalize our power, something happens to us.
Yeah.
And that what it is that happens to us can be detrimental.
She couldn't get it out of her
No,
head.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, this is why brainwashing and mind control, they're all related with another. It's basically implanting something into somebody's mind, okay, that you can't get out of your head. Now, in this case, or in these cases, when you go to like a reader or a channel or whatever, and they tell you something, well, you can at least pin it down to one event, right? You can
Yeah.
say, ever since I went there, or ever since she said that, you know, I have this in my mind. But what about the more subversive stuff that happens every day? What about the messages, the pictures that are being inserted, that are being implemented into our mind through everyday media? Let's analyze this for a second here. As of here, October 2020, what is the current level and exposure of mind control in the media? What is the predominant picture, the predominant thought, the predominant emotion that is evoked in us worldwide right now? Never been like this before. What would you say? Amanda's commenting division. Okay, so yeah, a form of separatism. How is that happening? Through creating teams, right? Or factions. Okay, the good and the bad somehow. It's very subtle. But the division is very obvious. Here in the United States, extremely obvious, represented through two parties, two leaders that we are soon to decide, that we soon have to choose between. But it's more, it goes deeper. This division goes deeper. Rich and poor, those who have jobs and those who don't have jobs, those who have health and those who don't have health, those who have power and those who don't have power. So division. But what is the number one emotion, the number one picture, the number one imagery, even if we don't watch news in form of video, what is the number one state that we are being exposed to right now?
Fear.
Absolutely. What kind of fear, Amanda?
It, to me, it goes all the way to this fear of annihilation, the fear of end of everything.
Mm-hmm. And what techniques are being used?
As far as like what mind control techniques? Or...
Yeah, I mean, just in our everyday life. In our everyday life. I mean, it's subtle, but it's ever present every day.
Well, right now it's very obvious. You know, you can't leave your house, and so certain stores, and there are, you know, if you do go to the store, there's big X's on the ground if you don't stand here. You know, kids can't go to school yet. I mean, everywhere you go,
We can't make any plans, right? We can't make any plans. There's this uncertainty about the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't even know if we survive it.
Right.
You know? We could get sick and die within 5 days, right? I mean, these are the pictures that are being created, and this actually helps to talk to kids about it because they see it for what it is. With all these bits and pieces of snippets that they only receive, they basically just receive the main message. And what is the main message? The main message is everything's changing. You have no freedom. You have to change your behaviors. You have to obey. And if you don't, you could die. You could lose everything and your whole entire future, because it's not just your personal life, it's also that of your children, your grandchildren, because the planet is dying too. Do you guys understand the amount of mind control we are all subjected to right now? This is full on spiritual warfare, guys. Because there's nothing in our human nature that protects us from that. Nothing. We can't protect us from it because it's not happening with our awareness. The X's on the ground, the face mask symbols on the doors of the stores, our kids being tied to computer screens, our bodies deteriorating indoors in a sitting position, us not being able to have any kind of reprieve or relief, you know, as in regards to making plans, building a future. We are currently in a acute state of mind control. This is the darkest deception or confrontation with untruths, as I often called, that we as a collective here have experienced in human history. And I'm not saying this to scare you. We're here to learn about this, but you see how important it is to first realize when mind control is happening. This isn't something external. This isn't something that happens to others. This isn't something that we can never fall for. We already have. We're in it. Do you understand the degree? I mean, we have different people here that work in different disciplines, right? Annette, you're a social worker. Amanda, you're a body worker. We have other body workers here. We have therapists here. We have coaches here. What is this currently doing to people? What is this fear, mind control doing? This massive brainwashing that we have experienced over the last 6 months that have done all of this to us. It has changed our thinking, it has changed our behavior, it has changed our emotions, it has changed our decision making. It has changed our relationships. It has changed our outlook on life. It has changed our future. What is this doing to us?
I'm finding that people are willing to sacrifice, parts of themselves or their own truth for little bits of perceived safety, to little bits of some kind of security. They'll give up, parts of their own truth or their own health or things like this.
Their own power. Yeah. Their own power to make themselves feel safe, to protect themselves. What's the way this is most evident? It's in this fixation on a vaccine, for instance. Because not only have we been indoctrinated with fear, we've also been conditioned to externalize our power to only one option that could save us. What is that? The vaccine? More control, more regulation, contact tracing. And less freedom. We have all become willing to accept that. Now I want you to go inward and I want you to think 1 year. I want you to think back to the beginning of the year. Let's say, New Year's 2020. We did a conscious manifestation workshop back then. I want you to go back to that place. If I would have told you, and actually I did, this year is going to change everything. It's going to change all values that you have. It's going to change your behaviors, your thinking, the way you feel. It's going to change your relationships. It's going to change how you make decisions. What did you think back then? This isn't going to happen to me, right? Guys, I don't want to depress you. I really need you and I needed to lead you to this moment of truth where you realize how all this is happening to you right now, okay? Because with that awareness, with that insight, you're going to be able to protect yourself. But you have to understand the degree of this first. You have to understand the severity of it. No matter what you think, what you can do and what you can control and how you can out-vibrate it, you are subject to it. And how is this happening to you? Like it is to all of us. Through exposure. Can we prevent exposure? Can we isolate ourselves, stop listening to news, and pretend all this isn't happening? Is this possible? What's your opinion?
No, we can't exit this collective. We're still part of it.
Yeah. So even if we go live in a cabin in the woods somewhere, okay, I mean, it's still going to affect us. So isolation, even if it's a chosen isolation, is not a guarantee. Okay. Usually it leads to severe neurological and psychological damage. Okay, and this has to do with our human nature. So I want you all to realize that our human nature is currently being used against us. Okay, and that this is severe. And the two main functions of our human nature, which in our context here, we often call ego. Yeah. Humanity and ego. We have this duality in us, okay, that are responsible for this when it comes to the mind control through fear, which is mostly, grouped here in this word psychological tactic. Okay, the easiest way to control a person is through fear. And the psychological tactics are all tactics that play into the core fear of the person. But what are the two main reactions that we as humans, due to our human nature, have? There's two main reactions, coping reactions. One is to externalize our power, what Amanda has laid out here, to give up our own power to keep ourselves safe. In the case of COVID, for example, it would be to work on our own immune system, to strengthen ourselves from within, to educate ourselves, to freely think, okay, to have our own thoughts about how we could resolve this, and not just to be shoved in the corner and having to choose between two options, okay, red or blue, or to isolate. So what do? We externalize that power, okay, we seek for the one solution, the shortcut, the lottery win, the fix it all in one, the big rescue or whatnot. That's one way our ego copes with this fear conditioning or mind control. And the other way is to rationalize, justify, blame, and become righteous about things, which we can currently see in the emergence of all kinds of fantastical thinking, conspiracy theories, really extreme groups and organizations that are forming right now, not because the people are dumb, because the people are trying to cope with their fear. They're being mind controlled, so they are being driven into this. Okay, they're either being driven in giving up all their control and, spending all their money and all their whatever resources they have into conforming and waiting in passivity till there is a vaccine or some kind of big rescue plan. Okay, or they're being driven into blind activism, conspiracy theories, political, religious, fanatical organizations to go out on the street and rebel and express their rage and anger, so that they can channel the energies of fear. So these are the two main coping strategies that the human uses. One is submission, apathy, fawning, giving up control. And the other one is fighting against it, fight, flight. You've heard this many times. Yeah, and in between is the freezing state where it's not apathetic, but it is like you're not doing anything. In your observation as conscious selves and sort of following this train of thoughts, what do you think the majority of people are in? What state, what energetic state are the majority of people in? Fight, flight, or freeze? Apathy, fear, or anger? Flight, freeze, or fight? Well, the majority of people are in fear. They're frozen. Who of us here, raise your hand, feels frozen? Not knowing what to do, kind of somehow waiting for something to happen, and sort of in a halt type of limbo kind of situation? Raise your hand. Okay, that's roughly 20% of us. No, it's a bit more. Okay, 30%. Who of you feels just like you completely just want to give up? You're waiting for the big solution. You know, you just like sort of have this idea that, you know, if you just comply, if you just, you know, do what is asked of you, you know, that everything is going to be fine. It's going to be fine. That's probably the best description of that state. Kind of rationalizing it away with, oh, good, this is just a phase. This is just an episode. Okay, that's no one here. Who of you feels this drive or this urge to rebel against it? To do something about it, to, you know, convince others, to, you know, like, you know, just really go against it, not to conform, not to wait, not to submit. Okay, that's 20% of you. Who of you sees a third or actually a fourth option? A solution. Okay, that's 10% roughly. Okay, what is that? Amanda, since you're so willing to share here today, what is it that you can see as a fourth option?
Well, for me, it's, you know, I've been doing this work and this training and for a really long time. And before, where I kind of felt like it was a little bit underground, I feel ready to kind of bring it out of the woodwork, because now this is what people are looking for. And, you know, even, you know, having a new idea to apply it in an arena that I never thought I could apply it to is working, right? So it just feels like an open door to like throw things out there, because there's so much, nothing is certain. So that means like anything could work.
Yes. It just opened up a huge opportunity for what? What is it exactly that you're throwing out there? You're not throwing, you haven't formed your own religion or whatever.
No,
What is it that you were throwing out there?
well, just implementing what I do in different areas, whether it's doing it online, whether it's integrating it into sports, all of these different ways that I never
What are
just
these ways?
implemented.
What is it that you're throwing out there?
Well, I'm a, you know, an energy worker, but also a yoga therapist and a mobility coach. And so who would have thought I could do these things virtually, but I can, and it's working. I've offered to implement it into other youth events and sports teams as everybody goes through these changes.
But what is it actually that you're putting out there? What is the energy of what you do that you are putting out there, that you see this opening for?
I guess I'm not sure what you're asking, but the energy is just newness.
How is this helping people?
To contextualize and to continue to get their own power back.
Yes, yes, empowerment, self-awareness.
All that for that word.
Yes, it's this, by the way, here, this is level 3 trans coaching training. You got to be 100% aware of what that is that you're offering the world. Okay. That's a big part of the training, to become absolutely aware of what it is that you're throwing out there. What is it that you're throwing? Not some techniques. You're not throwing techniques out. You're throwing out an energy. You're emitting an energy, you know, not like as a mystical energy or something, as in like an attitude.
Yeah.
That does what for people? That can help them in what way? Taking their own power back.
Yes.
You're a freedom fighter. And so you and you and you and you, because that's what we do. That's the purpose of this work. And if you don't know who you are and what your purpose is, think again. You are part of a very small majority of people in this world who have the consciousness level to see how to break through that collective mind control. Utilizing techniques that are inherent in all people, but a part of the human nature, that can form in immunity, a protection against those techniques that are being used against us. And what are these techniques all based on? They're all based on deception. And how do they use this deception? They use our own perception. They hijack our, and when I say they, I don't mean any particular group of people or organizations. They use the own fallibility of our perception against us. And trust me, there is no need for conspiracy theories. That's a very immature way. That's an ego behavior, you know, that helps it to relieve your anger, but it really still promotes the fear. Because all you're really saying is that, you know, you're being betrayed and you're the victim. So you're just like in a sort of secondary way confirming to yourself that you're a victim and that it's not your fault. Righteousness, justification, and blaming all come from the ego's need to not being responsible, to not taking responsibility. And that includes etheric abuse or manipulation. So the true power that can cut through all this is courage, is hope, is faith, is truth. In combination with education, in combination with training certain ways of thinking, certain ways of feeling, ways of sensing, moving, and communicating. So basically, we are helping people to break free from mind control through showing them their inner power and re-educating, what's it called here? Reforming, recontextualizing, reframing, re-educating them. We are delivering them the remedies, the antidotes, the medicine that is also inherent in all of us. That's the purpose of our work as healers, as therapists, as counselors, as coaches. Not for the purpose of gaining more control, of being more persuasive, or getting any kind of personal gain from it. This doesn't exclude that we can't be abundant and wealthy through the work, but it's not the goal. Okay, so the reason why so many of us healer types say have this existential purpose crisis is because we're not realizing the importance of it. So when we move on now to etheric abuse. Etheric abuse is mind control and brainwashing techniques utilizing unseen energetic projection for the purpose of control, power, and or destruction. Whoa, Okay, so same thing, but now on a multidimensional level, on an unseen level. Let's just come back to our discussion here real quick. The fear conditioning that we are experiencing right now through media, is that unseen? Is that etheric? What do you think? Is there an energetic component to that?
Yes, there is an energetic component to that.
Where do you see that?
I can feel it more than I can see it.
Okay, it has an effect on you. Okay,
Yeah.
it has an energetic effect on you. You, as energetically sensitive, will feel this attack. Will feel this effect, probably in form of an attack.
Yes, that's what it feels like.
Yes, and this is because you have a certain amount of training and energy awareness. Everybody feels the effects of it. Okay, there is no exception, except from maybe some isolated tribes in the Amazon or whatever. Not. So, but they might still feel the energetic effect of it. Okay, they might still be totally in the know in regards to the etheric bombardment. Yeah. So we can feel the effect, but is the means with which it's done, is it done through utilizing unseen energetic projection? It's not. It's way simpler. And that's why when we investigate etheric abuse and how to protect ourselves from it, we can see how this could be resolved through utilizing our energy awareness. The main techniques that are being used on us are physiological techniques by programming our nervous system, by utilizing our brain chemistry, our neuroscience, our neurotransmitters, by utilizing our inner child attachments, yes, which has to do with our conditioning, our psychological conditioning, our addictive structure, our egos, our cognitive bias. The cognitive bias in our societies right now is more or less dog eats dog. Okay, that we have to compare, compete, we have to win over others. Okay, it's a patriarchal, very masculine way of seeing the world, right? It's win or lose. That's our circuitry, that's our operating system. And worst of all, it's utilizing our fixed mindset. What's a fixed mindset? Rigid thinking, beliefs, belief systems. Those are the techniques that media uses, or, say this whole sort of collective programming on us. And it's very effective because it plays directly into our human nature. This is why we can't do anything about it. That's why it affects all of us. And it messes with our energy. What does it do to our energy? It lowers our guards, and it makes us more willing to externalize our powers. In this whole discussion about COVID, guys, except for, I know many of you don't even watch the news or read the studies out there or follow the political discussions. And if you've listened to my publications here since February, March, then this is aware to you. But in the public discussion, there is no word about how to strengthen our immune system, how to prevent an infection or the disease, how to lower the viral count, how to make ourselves stronger, even in the case of an infection, or how to work towards para immunity, not even contracting it in the first place. No discussion about it. Have you noticed that?
It's so left out that to even speak about it is almost like you're a conspiracy theorist by talking about your immune system doing what it's supposed to do. It's like you're like, but science, you know, we have biology, we can talk about how to do this, but you're almost a conspiracy theorist just by talking about the strength of your own immune system now.
You bringing up another aspect, and that is what is science. Right now, under the cover of science, we are being bombarded with statistics. Yeah. Statistics isn't science, guys.
No.
All right, there is a massive manipulation going on right now. And I'm not saying this to depress you. I'm saying this for you to become aware of the mechanics, because we can observe them right now within ourselves. These are the mechanics of mind control and brainwashing. But what are the components here of etheric abuse? So when it comes to the energetic effect of it, it gets even more complex. Yeah, so we've defined, okay, mind control and this manipulation through our human nature, our five senses, and our psychological and sociological and physiological condition. Okay, but when it comes to etheric abuse, we're talking about negative energies being sent into our direction. Okay, but it's very complex here, because we feel as energetically sensitives, and many of your clients probably are energetically sensitives. They will perceive everything on this energetic level, so they will perceive the deception that is going on right now in our societies, in our world, as an etheric attack. Why? Because it comes with these huge amounts of negativity. If it victimizes us, so we feel betrayed and we feel controlled in a way that it even affects our bodies without knowing what is going on. It affects our emotions without knowing what's going on. It affects our entire psychological condition, the way we think, the way we can think about future, and so forth, and with it then our energetic states. So this is the problem with energetically sensitives. Okay, energetically sensitives without training. So the first thing that you can already conclude is that an energetically sensitive person will suffer more from all this mind control that happens on the collective level, because they're not just feeling this on their physiological, psychological, and sociological levels. They'll also feel it on their energetic levels, and it will mess with their self-perception, not just in a cognitive way, but also in the way they perceive their own energies and other people's energies. So there's a massive etheric impact here on a person through these. It's not utilizing etheric techniques per se, but it has an etheric effect on energetically sensitives. And as the number of energetically sensitives is growing in this world, it leads to an even deeper and more detrimental damage. Amanda, you defined this as the loss of self-identity, the loss of connection, the loss of self, and in a way that it almost coerces the person to become self-destructive. You
Or
didn't say this per se, but you
you
meant it, right?
used the word annihilation, and that's the
Mhm.
word.
Yes,
That's
it's a self-annihilation to a certain
it's a
degree.
self-annihilation, yes.
Yes, you are willingly giving up your sense of self.
And
Willingly.
then you will also willingly annihilate yourself.
Yes. And how does this annihilation take place? And this is where we have to look at the etheric abuse aspects. The way it happens is that we are willingly giving up our I am. We're willingly giving up our soul self. And how does this happen? By letting go. So by succumbing to all of this, by giving up our free will. And why do we do this? Because we have an ego. Because we cannot bear this energetic load, this energetic bombardment for very long. This confrontation with untruth and all these layers that we've already discussed here are unbearable for us. Which adds another level of importance to the kind of work that you guys do. Because this is my interpretation of what is going on here. That's why I have done so many workshops and lectures on dark and light forces, angels and demons here in these past months, because we are in fact in a acute state of spiritual warfare, and spiritual more in the sense of etheric warfare that is happening. So the reason why conspiracy theories in that sense don't really make sense is because these people, groups of people, whatever, that are being used as the scapegoats, they are really not the ones doing it. They are agents of that. They are manipulated souls as well. Those are I ams, those are selves, okay, that have already given up. They have already given up by choosing the dark. And I do not want you guys to feel afraid of this. I want you to understand the dynamics of it, and how this happens to a person. It can happen to any person, and that is through torture, through etheric torture, through etheric attack.
I almost
Okay.
used the word torture, but
Yeah.
I pulled back. But
This is a form of torture.
it's torture.
Okay, guys. So this is it sounds very dramatic here, but I don't know if you can follow me here. If you think this is too out there, but I really need you to understand this. This is an attack on our self identity, with the purpose of destruction, well, control, power, and destruction of ourself, of our free will to choose. To choose what? To choose between, well, there's no other words that I can use for this, but I have to use it in that way: the dark or the light, the dark force or the light source. Okay, that is what's behind that, and that is what etheric abuse has as a goal. Now, when etheric abuse comes in our daily forms, okay, say, what are the examples in etheric attacks that come sort of from everyday type of situations? It's maybe excess, it's ill-willing co-workers, it's from people who feel threatened by us somehow, people who want to control us in a way that they can use us for their purposes. Okay, people who simply want to really make us question our sense or our self. Okay, so that we'll willingly give up ourself. And this is then also why I bring cults into this whole discussion, because cults is a cult. The definition of a cult is not clear. It's not entirely agreed upon. But if we just, for the sake of simplicity, use a few of these definitions here, and look at it as an organization or a group of people, or some kind of unit of people, okay, that does that with a certain strategic goal, with an agenda, okay, namely to drive a person into letting go of their sense of self. Then we will find out that most of the spiritual organizations, at least in the last 100 years, if we exclude world religions, okay, so world religions also, from a certain perspective, count as cults, okay, but if we just evade that discussion right now and focus around some famous spiritual groups such as Bhagwan, or I can't even count them all, but there was many different examples for spiritual groups, starting with the early 20th century Theosophical Society, and all the way through the Wicca movement, the New Age movement, all forms of occultism, all kinds of movement towards some kind of group identity, okay, that uses etheric techniques, that uses the unseen, okay, to accomplish their goals. Now, one specific group, and this is where I want to dive a little deeper in here, and it's not a group, it's actually an individual, or an individual that leads a group, where we frequently find this in everyday life, especially in times like right now, where they basically got permission here through some of our societal structures, namely narcissists, okay, they bring in the real life example for all these mind control and brainwashing techniques, as well as etheric abuse. So that's why I would like to use narcissist mind control techniques as example, as framework here for discussing these techniques, so that we can then in part 2 develop self-healing strategies and a roadmap for ourselves as well as for others on how to inoculate ourselves, how to protect ourselves from either physiological, psychological, emotional, social, collective, or etheric controls. So let's look into the definition of cult. A cult is a hierarchical organization created by a charismatic narcissistic leader which uses mind control techniques to amass money, power, or sex. Yeah, it's very similar to the definition of etheric abuse and also mind control. It's always the agenda, but a cult is typically, most of the examples for cults, for the famous cults in the past, have some kind of charismatic narcissistic leader. There's many cults that fit this definition, many of which we will never find out or hear anything about it because they're so small, they're insignificant. There's many different variations. There's extreme cults that make the news because they're somehow based on apocalyptic type of prophecies. These visionary cult leaders that have sort of some kind of prophetic type of influence on people, that say, okay, in 2012 or whatever, the world is going to go under. We might as well all commit suicide. So mass suicides are always things that kind of shock the world. but they are all based on the very same mechanics that we've already discussed, namely the willingness, okay, to give up our own self and basically initiate our own self-destruction. Now, the more sophisticated calls that work in I would say, even more perverted way are those kind of examples that I made earlier, such as Nexium, that are disguised as self-help, self-improvement, and success programs. Okay, these are very, very dangerous because people actually come in with the intention to learn ways to inoculate themselves and are basically sort of from behind, okay, pulled into this. This is something that if those of you who are interested, that you can right now in follow in the media because of the sentencing of the cult leader of Nexium next week. So there's a lot of coverage of this right now, and it's very interesting how this happens and how this can happen to all of us. Even looking at transCODES and some of the techniques and so forth that I teach, and also the basically the main message here, okay, how this can be construed, how this can be misused. And just on a side note, I want you to know that I have this disclaimer with all techniques, with all transmissions, with all trainings that I have, that I can, without giving any reason, exclude somebody from the training. And that has to do with me detecting someone who tries to misuse it. Okay, this is a very important business decision to approach this with the integrity, to understand that if this kind of training comes into the wrong hands, if this arrives at a person with a narcissistic um, goal setting, okay, the exploitation and the manipulation of other people, it can be very dangerous. There's of course no control, 100% control over this, but I have very important safeguards that I've developed over the years, how I can expose those people and exclude them from this training. Here, another definition that I found in modern English: a cult is a social group that is defined by its unusual religion, spiritual or philosophical belief, or by its common interest in a particular personality, object, or goal. This sense of the term is controversial, having divergent definitions both in popular culture and academia, and has also been an ongoing source of contention among scholars across several fields of study. It's very important for you to understand the word cult is even used in our colloquial English right now for anything that's kind of cool. Okay, so in social media you see the word all over. So we got to be careful with this, but if we can agree on the techniques that are being used and how they can lead a person into the willingness to give up their own self, their own identity, often also all their social relations, to be willing to isolate themselves. And what you just said, Amanda, there is this constant fight, this constant fight with the outside world, okay, where you have to let go of all your needs, your human needs, okay, your need for belonging, your need for security, your need for esteem, and true connection in order to stay in that cult. And there's heavy ramifications if you're trying to leave the cult. So that's why religions are a bit excluded, even though some church groups use these techniques, where they actually shun a person, shame a person, or make it very difficult through economic ties or through social ties to leave that organization. But in cults, it's usually to the point of threats, to the point of physical abuse, physical restraint, complete economic drainage, and sort of the willingness to go against your own family and so forth. So let's just stick with this, for instance, and investigate this here a little bit, how this can happen, and why this can happen. What is, if you analyze the psychology of the cult leader, the goal of a cult leader, besides the obvious, okay, to amass money, power, or sex? What drives that person? What drives the person is the ability to do this to people, the willing victims. And why would somebody do this? We talked about empathy earlier, and the lack of empathy in narcissists, and why this often goes hand in hand. So psychopathy, being having sociopathic, psychopathic problems. Okay, not everybody who acts narcissistically is a narcissist. Okay, so there's a definition that you guys can look up, but they all come with one major component, and that is the absence or the denial of that humanity. Okay, and often also in combination with the absence of empathy. Okay, so there is no human notion anymore that comes with guilt or regret, remorse, or contrition. Okay, this is the absence that we can see in all these cults and these cult leaders, that is using your humanity, your ego, your senses, your brain chemistry, your decision making, your neurotransmitters, your inner child conditioning against you. Okay, so the mechanics of mind control are always the same, but in conjunction with cults, are used as techniques to alter a person's freedom of choice and influence a person's or a group of persons thinking, decision making, behaviors, habits, beliefs, and self identity. And the best example for this is the narcissistic mind games and manipulation tactics. Don't mind that I'm using these narcissistic mind games and manipulation tactics here as an example, because this is exactly how this works in cults. This is exactly how this works with social collective programming, and also in family cults, in companies, in any kind of everyday situations. Even in school, I see these techniques in education, and especially in spirituality. Okay, see this more here as an overall strategy, then you understand these techniques better. So the first thing, and I want to explain this to you and really break this down, why this can work, is enticing, charming, love bombing, pretending interest. Okay, this is always how it starts. There is something that we, as the seekers, we as the humans that are trying to find something, we have needs, we want to belong, we want to feel safe, we want to feel better about ourselves, we're seeking something. And it always starts with this enticing, with this mesmerization, with something that we're getting there. Okay, so there will always be this feeling that this sort of an irresistible notion in us, okay, where we're getting something that we're not getting somewhere else, anywhere else. Number two is data collection and making you trust them. So here is where the information is being used against us later. Okay, so this often happens through, forming the attitude of unconditional trust. Okay, we're all friends, we have no secrets, we are all seeking truth, we are sharing everything with another, we're sharing our deepest secrets, we're sharing our whatever conflicts we have. Okay, for the purpose of it being used against us later. Okay, but mainly under the disguise of conditional trust. Then number 3 tactic is to distract us, to blindside us, and to gaslight. There is a crazy making component that plays out, Amanda mentioned this earlier, that plays out in the way that we are starting to question our own reality. Okay, this is a severe component of mind control. Okay, in order to do this, we have to mess with the person's worldview. Okay, not we, but in order to be able to control somebody, their worldview has to be challenged. Now, again, here I want you to see that some of the coaching techniques and therapy and counseling and so forth uses similar techniques, but for a different reason. Okay, we are questioning mindsets and rigid thinking and belief systems and behaviors because the person has identified that they're unhealthy. In cults or in a mind control situations, you are questioning things that are healthy for you. Okay, you're questioning your boundaries. You're questioning, your ways of your own values. Okay, and while this can have a therapeutic effect, sometimes it's very, very dangerous. Especially when it comes with a blindsiding, when everything else gets faded out and this constant repetition and constant exposure bombards us. Then the double binding. Okay, the double binding is something that happens through something in regards to narcissistic behavior, often with virtue signaling, meaning that we are being bound in a way that we are ultimately screwed no matter what we do. Okay, that's what double binding means. It means that you're no longer free to make a decision. How is that accomplished? By using our own goals and our own values against us. Okay, so basically saying, oh, aren't you the empath? Aren't you the one that is based on truth, that is, wants to live a life, for the greater good for all? And why are you doing this? And this is something that I can use against you, because if you continue doing that, then I can prove to others, I can shame you and others by telling them, all the things where you are untrue. Okay, virtue signaling. That's often how we've been double bound. There is other things where we can be double bound by enmeshment, by using other people. Okay, the love for others, or even if it's in our relationships where we encounter this, where you'll hear things such as, I thought you loved me. Okay, this is something that hints at a mind control technique. I thought you loved me means that if you love me, then you have to do what I say. And if you don't, then I question that you love me. So now you're screwed either way. Other typical double bind situations are if you're being forced to make a choice between, say it's either me or your family, or me or, your mother, or me or your children. Okay, those are double bind situations because you don't actually have a choice. Okay, you're screwed either way. Number 5, devaluating your reality, okay, and your feelings and your needs, especially your needs. So for any kind of mind control and etheric abuse to take place, you got to question your own needs, and you got to question your own feelings, your own views. Okay, and the way this happens is through devaluating, constantly minimizing and devaluating it, that this isn't really a true need. You don't really need this. Oh, this is nothing. You don't need freedom. Okay, you don't need an immune system in our collective example here. Okay, all you need is a vaccine. Okay, just as an example. Then probably the most effective one that works with all of us is to create an inner confliction in us, to use our own duality against us by infiltrating us with cognitive dissonances. They're constantly making us feel, Amanda, I think you said something earlier, where we constantly feel this yucky feeling, okay, about ourselves. There's something isn't adding up. It's triggering all the schisms in us. Okay, so there's it's already the beginning of a self-destruct. So cognitive dissonances is a form of psychological and energetic self-destruct. You constantly attacking yourself and your own feelings, needs, thoughts, beliefs, and so forth, and you never actually come to a conclusion. It leads to passivity because you can't really make decisions anymore. You don't know what's right or wrong. You literally lose the ability to discern between right and wrong. Trauma bonding is something that we see more sort of in advanced stages of mind control, and that is in our collective right now. It's happening through the COVID situation. Is where you know, you've been in this mind control abuse situation for so long that you start to form alliances with other victims. Okay, in conspiracy theories or spiritual groups, you see this a lot, where you know, sort of all victims unite, and that can also be used against you. Okay, so it's something where you know, you become so insecure about yourself that you find solace with other people that have the same view, the same experience. It's confirmation bias. So if you're reconfirmed in your views, and when it's a cult or when there's an actual person behind this, so you know, then the cult leader will present him or herself as the savior, as the only one that can understand you, the only one that can help you out of this. That's what trauma bonding is. So hurt and rescue. So basically, you know, it creates a damage and then, you know, or a fear, and then produces itself as the fix. This is what has happened with us in the COVID situation, where we were basically indoctrinated with accepting COVID now as the reason for the economic hardships, as the reason for all these things that are being revealed right now, corruption and so forth, which is clearly not the case because they were there way before COVID was there. Hyper-criticizing. And hyper-criticizing through establishing insane rules happens through reducing your options. Okay, so it's like you have to wear a face mask, and if you don't wear a face mask, you know, then you might get you might get you might have to pay fines. In some countries, you have to pay fines, or you get reprimanded by other people. So you are coming into a place where you constantly supervising yourself, because no matter what it is that you do, your space, your operating space has been so reduced that no matter what that your thought is, okay, or what sort of like an insight produces in you, you immediately hearing sort of a critical inner voice in you that says, no, you can't do that. No, you, or the other way around, you should do this. You know, why aren't you doing this, and so forth. So hyper criticizing, you know, as a mind control technique, guys, is extremely effective with many of us, and the way it plays out is in form of these intrusive thoughts that so many of you have. This is something that has been done to you, okay, strategically over a prolonged amount of time. This isn't something that just occurs. Someone who suffers from intrusive thoughts, this doesn't come from nowhere, okay? This can come through trauma, and trauma always has this sort of brainwashing or mind control effect on us. It always attacks our sense of self, or strategic abuse. Addictive carrot dangling, lying and cheating. Okay, so the confrontation with untruths is obviously something that leads to all, you know, plays into all these other things. It's very complex, where we question our own reality. But there's a carrot dangling, meaning that if you do this, then you get relief. It plays directly into your ego's need for distraction, for relief, for some kind of pleasure, okay, some kind of reward. And that is something that especially social media has been using very effectively with us through messing with our neurotransmitter household. It's messing with our dopamine and serotonin balance by basically conditioning us to an outside approval rate, okay, the likes and dislikes, okay, are something that directly mess with our dopamine levels. It's very complex and very devious, actually, if you really look at it for what it is. And then, of course, the blame shifting, the sabotaging, and the separation. Amanda, you mentioned this in the beginning, but the blame shifting and sabotaging, that is something that you will find as a major part of any kind of mind control, is where you end up sort of either through the group's judgment, okay, or this intrusive thought, this cognitive dissonance, where your own critical inner voice continues the abuse, yeah, the self-destruct, where you begin to feel guilty, where you begin to see yourself as the cause of the problem. So I want to end here, guys, and start part 2, which will be in 2 weeks, same time, with the actual mind control techniques that all of you can watch this on YouTube. There's videos that I've made about this, so that we are now all on the same page to identify really the amount of manipulation, brainwashing, and mind control, and also etheric abuse. We're going to go a little deeper into this next time, how this can actually take a foothold in us. But the main message here of this part 1 and this discussion and investigation with you guys, this awareness making process, is the most important part of all of this. We have to understand why it can even happen. It can happen because we have a body that is designed in a certain way, a nervous system that is designed in a certain way, neurotransmitters, emotions, okay, that are basically conditioned through our inner child attachments, a mind that can be tricked into any kind of belief, especially the rigid mind, okay, someone who has, and will learn this next in the next part for the healing roadmap, someone who reprograms themselves to a growth mindset where you embrace all experiences as learning experiences and no longer follow the black and whiteness of your own duality, becomes less susceptible. So next time we go into like the actual counter techniques on how to become less susceptible. And then the third aspect of what is being used and why this is so effective is the ultimate self-destruct, the ultimate willingness of the victim of brainwashing, mind control, and etheric abuse to give up their free will and their own identity, their own self, their own I am, to give up their own soul, if you will. These are the 3 main goals of mind control and etheric abuse. As I said in the beginning, the complexity and also the timeliness of it and these real life examples that we have right now made it very clear to me that probably the most effective way for you to have your inner experience of all of what I'm talking about here through discussing this with you. Just real quick here, as we're wrapping up part 1 for feedback, guys, what is it that you take away from this first awareness making process here about mind control and etheric abuse? What is your takeaway from the self-mastery class? Who would like to share?
I think But just the education is helpful, because knowing what's going on is certainly better than feeling like you're crazy and you don't know what's going on. But also that the technique to protect yourself is just through understanding your own power and your own connection, and I guess that's where the immunity comes from. Self.
We have to understand first
Yeah.
what is being taken from us and what is being used. And it is ourselves that is being used against ourselves. That's the tricky part about it. That's why it's so devious. And that's why it's not that simple. It's very complex. That's why everything that I teach, that I educate, that I train plays into this. Because it all leads to exactly that we recognize our own power and that we learn how to reclaim it. On the physical, on the emotional, mental, social, spiritual, and etheric level. It's a holistic problem. Mind control happens to all of us. It's not a matter of intelligence, not a matter of techniques. It's a matter of consciousness. So in order to fully grasp this, we have to up our consciousness. And only then can we actually see all this, and then we can reverse engineer what we can do against it or how we can help other people to protect themselves from it. But first, we have to admit this to ourselves. That it's our own ego that makes us willing victims. And sometimes, unbeknownst to ourselves, perpetrators. That too is something we need to become aware of. That's why I liked Annette's question in the beginning. Is gossiping, and even, the less obvious forms, where you just sort of hate thoughts towards a person, directing negative energies towards a person, can that also be seen as etheric abuse or mind control? Not really, because it's part of our daily experience as humans, okay? And it doesn't actually have a strategy behind it. But it can lead to becoming more susceptible to other people's mind controls. Because if you use a lot of manipulation, if you use a lot of projection, you are wide open and actually more susceptible to other people's mind control or, overall mind control. It is very, very important to understand. So once more, next time we're going to look a little bit into the mechanics of energetic absorption and projection, because those are the mechanics that are being used for etheric abuse, and why it's so important that we become aware of our own inner dynamics to protect ourselves. There are no techniques in this world that can help you other than knowing who you are, standing in your own self. And then there are certain practices that you can do to train that, to become more resilient, to make this your way of being, to embody that. And that's the most effective protection. I don't know if you agree with my way of doing this, but based on all my experience, just sort of the intellectual education is not enough. We have to experience this from within to understand the true problem so that we can develop an antidote, an effective antidote for it, and also help other people. Thank you very much. My special thanks here to Amanda and Annette, who shared and contributed in this beautiful way. Thank you very much. And I hope that you've learned something today. And I'm looking forward to the part 2. All the best.